And then, of course, then we had touched the conversation, on how FMTALI becomes a material player in how we rethink our competitiveness in a fourth industrial context. As a lady originally from Mpumalanga, we don't know where they are in terms of 4IR readiness. But really, I mean, in essence, how does FMTALI really, start to really strengthen and galvanize the conversation towards a fourth industry-ready workforce?
Let me give you some perspective around 4IR readiness, right? Yeah. So from a perspective of governance, and we talk about it a lot, and a lot of our leaders will talk about how the fourth industrial revolution, it means that we're going to be more digitally centered, we're going to be more digitally focused. It does not necessarily mean that we're going to be replaced by machines, but it's going to be around how do we make use of automation. We say that from a contextual perspective when we're on our podiums, right? The mining sector comes in and then they start using words such as we need to be able to automate and make the mining sector more safe and more valuable, and we need to be able to look at our value chain, and we need to be able to look at our production lines and see how is it that we can best capacitate on the little that we've got. And we do know that shafts, sometimes everything collapses and we don't want loss of life. So what we need to do now is introduce machinery to go into the ground and be able to mine. What they're not telling you is that machines cost. The initial cost might be hefty, but remember, once you pay that once off, all you're paying now is for the maintenance of the machine that that's going to be operating. Yeah. So from that perspective, you've already saved yourself a lot of money, because machines don't need a monthly salary. Yeah. Right? So machines don't need to be paid every month. Number two, machines don't go on strike. Machines don't go on strike. They don't demand 8% wage increases when something happens. Machines don't have sick children. They don't go on sick leave. They don't become absent. They don't talk back. They don't send emails that are not supposed to be sent. Machines are just wired and coded to give you what you want to have from an input perspective, right? Then what happens? Society goes up in complete upheaval. Unions feel as though they're going to be replaced, and then they say, you cannot do this as employers. You need to be able to find a way to work with machines and still be able to open the mind so that our mine workers can work. Yeah. My question then is, when are we going to start having conversations around diversifying the economy? Yeah. This trajectory is going in a one-way direction. That direction is how, from an employer's perspective, how do I get the most value out from the minimum value put in? And how do I make this sustainable, especially looking at where technology is going? And these are conversations that are they're being held. If you didn't know that these conversations are being held, they're being held in boardrooms where you're not present.
But do these companies even know their real exposure to kind of this fourth industry, right? And the reason I ask is we've kind of developed some white paper and some research now that's starting to take a sector view, for example, and say 4IR is not 4IR for the sake of 4IR. 4IR manifests very differently in different sectors, 100%. Right? You've got creative industries, for example, where 80% of the labor force there is not susceptible to automation. Right? And so you still need people who are going to do the rigs and all of the other stuff in various parts of the value chain within the creative industry, and even there, the sub-industries, right? Then you go to mining, and probably a lot of the jobs there are susceptible to automation. You go to call centers, a lot of those jobs you know what I mean? They're on their way out. You go into branches. And so this 4IR conversation means something different for different sectors.
And that's my point. Yeah. The fact that we're having these conversations are being held in boardrooms, right, around 4IR, as well as how then do we start becoming more productive by having that minimum cost that's been put in, right? However, in that conversation, there needs to be what was supposed to have happened was then with the workforce that is currently in existence, a significant portion of the workforce then are going to be deemed redundant because of the jobs that can be done by automation, right, which are safer. So then how do we start upskilling and reskilling and ensuring that people are able to take on different positions? For example, that machine needs to be maintained, right? The code, who's going to actually subscribe the code for that machine to go underground? And who's going to be able to maintain that code? Right? So it's all coding. And on the other side of it, okay, so we need to look at the human capital. How then do we start diversifying our human capital? Do you know that in some organizations they've got like a happiness head or happiness manager, somebody that just manages organizational culture and ensures that the culture of the organization is in a good, productive construct. There's situations where we need to look at transformation managers, right? How do we ensure that organizations have got individuals that are there for the purpose of ensuring transformation actually happens? Look at our private sector. That will say something about how there is no transformation individual there. So when we're looking at the different skills that we're able to plug into and plug out of as a result of this fourth industrial revolution. However, as employers, they're not upskilling their people. So what happens is that you're just leaving a blanket of fear instead of what should have happened was, guys, the truth of the matter is we need to diversify in our offering as this. Yeah. Why don't you go into data analytics? Because data is the number one resource. It's a currency. Yeah. The currency of the future is data. Because if you've got about 500 faiths and you know what they like, where they go, what they eat, how they eat, what time they eat, do you know that you can design adverts that speak to faith? You can design services that speak to faith. You can design opportunities that speak to faith. And all of this can be done within various sectors of industry, right? Because data is what is going to be the next currency. You can have somebody that's going to analyze that data, a data analyst, because you need to know what happens at what particular moment in time. You can even say, okay, so the mining sector, when it comes to actual groundwork, right? Let's just say we're canceling the jobs. But what happens to the waste that comes out of the mining sector? Because that goes into what? That goes into waste management. And also, how are we going to be eco-friendly? We're talking about gas emissions. How are we going to lower down and leverage off gas emissions? These are all sub-categories of employment that are coming out of just one job being displayed or being taken over by a machine. So we don't have those conversations.
And so how then does the FMTALI curriculum then tie into this very conversation?
I love the fact that you asked it, because that's exactly what we're skilling with our girls. So our girls are studying and they're going to be taken through a program of data analytics, data science. They're going to be doing coding. They've just actually gone through a coding program, Internet of Things. They're going to be looking at personal development. So the first semester is all about self, right? Yeah. It's all about personal development, goal setting, vision boarding, entrepreneurship, introduction to entrepreneurship, introduction to the fourth industrial revolution, introduction into technology, introduction into self. How to be a 21st century woman catalyst. That is our semester. First semester. Second semester goes into the technical side of it. What I mentioned, analytics, Internet of Things, data science, because they have to be able to understand the subject matter and fully be able to participate with it fully, right? And we have part of the organizations that I can't mention because whilst this airs, but that are going to be teaching, various educators that are going to be teaching this program to them. So they're going to be involved extensively. And also I must say that when our girls start their programs, we give them laptops. We say to them, we can't introduce you to the fourth industrial revolution if you don't even have a laptop. At a minimum, take a laptop, play. Right? And so they're going to be learning these various subject matters. Semester 3, they're going to be actually going through an accelerator program where with the learnings that they've got, now they're going to be designing products and services that speak to the very same learnings. And you know why? Because we need to stop looking for jobs and we need to start becoming solutions to problems that we're facing. And not everybody is going to do that. But in that, there's somebody that can manage the project. There's a project manager. There's somebody that can oversee the project. There's somebody that can formulate the strategy for it. That's the strategist. So there are all these subcategories that come out of just innovation and deciding to take it to the next level.
And also so there's a very big difference with being an entrepreneur and being entrepreneurial. That's it. And I think the bulk of the work that you're doing is in essence, how do you help us all become entrepreneurial? Because that's just about solutioning, right? And saying there's a process here that's inefficient. How do I make that process more efficient? Or there's acid water drainage there. How do we create innovation around preventing that water from going to households, etc.? But that's all solutioning, right? It doesn't need for you to actually run your own business for you to be able. Absolutely.
Was a CC? Well, that's now declared a private company. I don't have to open up a private company in order for me to be a solutions person.
Absolutely.
In corporations, if we had more people that are thinking towards an entrepreneurial perspective, right? How do I maximize from my department? We would be more effective in productivity because we wouldn't make everything other people's problems. We'd actually say, how do I then solve for X? But too many of us are looking for someone to give us the answers instead of solving for X and then demanding a high salary because you solve for X, because I'm a conscious just a capitalist. I really am. I'm a conscious capitalist.
She calls herself a conscious capitalist with sustainability at the core of that conversation.